Good morning. How do you do today? Fabulous. Um, where do we begin? Where do we go? Where have I come from, cont'd Joe? So, once upon a time, the world was a place that I deemed appropriate to exist in. In these days, the world is something that is both complicated and simple. It's both advanced and, I guess, degenerate. Um, the way that the world is something that doesn't really enter into the mind of most people because it's something that simply exists. The fact that people don't think about it is as indicative as anything that people do think about. Because if you sit and think, oftentimes you'll have less of an understanding than somebody who does something effortlessly. If I'm going to sit and think about a problem that I have, as opposed to just simply dealing with it, it's going to end up leading me to a far different conclusion and a far different location than if I were to say, okay, well, I'm just gonna go ahead and deal with it, figure it out. I mean, just tending towards trying to find answers where they don't exist, as opposed to internalizing something properly. The ability to just the ability to cope, or the ability to what's the word for it? The ability to properly adapt. That's the word. Jesus. The ability to adapt to a situation is something that is highly prized in society. Why? Well, because it's something that has been incredibly necessary for the human race to get where it is, and to be able to advance to the point that we're at right now. Honestly, a lot of humanity can really be boiled down to an algorithm. A lot of it can be boiled down to very basic things, thoughts, and actions that we all do, consciously or not, because it's in our genetics. There are very few statistical outliers for most of these things. So, that said, most of the people see themselves as the outliers, even though they are probably people that buy in or are also part of the genetic, I guess you could say, like, not necessarily lottery, but the genetic predisposition to specific ideas, feelings, thoughts, etc. Because this is going nowhere mighty fast. What else is there? Let me grab something to drink. It's funny because I went for a walk this morning and I was able to start thinking things that I would have wanted to record, and I decided not to record them because I figured that they would be just as easy to grasp when I didn't have anything causing me to look for what I was looking for than it should be for somebody to obtain something if they are looking for something. And then I ended up speaking with somebody who I haven't spoken to, verbally at least, in numerous weeks, months, which was nice. It's nice to be remembered as existing. It's nice to be somebody that still matters to someone. coexisting in this world. Forgetting, I guess it's not necessarily forgetting. It's that some people don't occur to your mind that they exist unless they do specific things. Or if they exist in a very specific time frame or window of opportunity. It's like, I don't hold it against people that they forget about me. Or necessarily even think that they do forget about me, I guess. Which is kind of a strange thing to say, all things considered. Because it's easy to forget about somebody that's not in your purview. But what does that mean? Well, nothing, necessarily at least. Because your brain tries to make use of very specific things. It tries to make use of things that it deems important or useful. So if it doesn't deem what you've offered to somebody as important or useful, it doesn't necessarily mean that you are any less valued. But it can mean a bunch of weird things. It can mean that you are taken for granted, or that you are you're somebody that finds it hard to express yourself, perhaps. Like me. I have difficulty expressing myself, which is why I find myself needing to speak to nobody, to get comfortable in the idea that it's okay to just speak. I find myself apologizing for speaking to people because I don't feel comfortable taking their time when literally they would be able to just do just about anything else if they felt like it. So it's not really my place to feel uncomfortable about that, because it's not the correct idea. It's not something that you should worry about. It's not something that should even enter into your mind necessarily, because it's a pointless thing to think. So where does that leave us? This leaves us in a place where I overthink everything, which is kind of obvious. And I find myself going back to the stilted way of thinking, the stilted way of speaking, the stilted way of existing, because I don't really know what to do. But that's because I'm looking for a to-do. I'm not looking for a, okay, well, this is the answer type thing. I probably should be. No, I probably shouldn't be, actually. Because there is no such thing as the answer. The answer, as it were, is that there is no answer. We've been over this. So what does that mean? It doesn't mean anything. That's kind of the point. But who do we hold accountable for life? Well, that's the question that we've been trying to rally after since our inception. We may never know the answer to that. But even if we had the answer, what would we do with it? It's the type of thing where we're going to make up stories rather than, even if we had the truth, would anyone believe it as well? These ideologies. People can't agree on anything if they're wearing different hats. So the odds of being able to agree on something, even if we had irrefutable evidence of it, is very slim. It's like, most often the legal system these days isn't about the truth so much as it is about winning or losing, to most people anyway. And where does that leave us? It leaves us in a very odd predicament where people have value in locations where it shouldn't belong. It's like, I need to learn something. Well, what is my method of doing this? Not learning it, and instead just forcing myself to temporarily have the information long enough for those who are going to test me about it to say that my ability to recall this is satisfactory, and then I will completely forget it because I will probably never use it again. That's basically the purview of the world right now. We're looking at a society that is based not on truths, but instant gratification. We're giving our future to a people that have the attention span of a goldfish, even though that myth has been disproven, the whole goldfish thing. But you can still get the comparison. A 5-second ability to focus is not necessarily something prized in society, but it is more or less the mainstream, the accepted truth, the being, the who, the where, the why. It's quite a weird thing to think about, really. But at the same time, it's something that occurs so naturally that nobody ever questions it. So what does that mean? It means that we are a people who are dedicated to what some would argue is the wrong thing. And others would say that there is no other option aside from the one that we have. And neither viewpoint is necessarily wrong, it's just that they are only beneficial to yet another very specific mindset, where you can only see things a very specific way. If that is, what's it called? Confirmation bias. It is a very specific, weird, underlying type of confirmation bias, where everything is seen as argumentum ad populum. Haven't said that one in a while. Where people think that a personality trait that is genetically passed along to the majority of the population ends up being the correct thing, even though it could be something damaging or just simply straight up bad for humanity. The fact that the majority of the population has it ends up leading people to think, okay, well, that's just the way it should be, rather than, can we be better? And then there are those who would argue that the fact that people are then saddled with a set of circumstances that everyone can agree upon and or all have against them could then lead people to finding another very specific answer. Which I guess I can see why you would think that. This is a arguably very specific time frame, a very arguably specific set of circumstances, an arguably specific life. When these records are found, when somebody pores over the facts, the details, the idiosyncrasies, somebody might eventually find this audio log, and if they do, will it be important to them? somebody somewhere could find incredible value in the words that I'm saying. It's the only reason that I keep saying them. And I think that that mindset is the entire reason that a lot of people can keep going. There's the whole phenomenon of popularity, which most people don't necessarily want popularity for popularity's sake. They want it because it feels good to be wanted. They want it because having sway over people is an incredible feeling. But what do you do once you realize that you don't have that for the right reasons, and or you cannot continue that ad infinitum? It's like the people that were popular for their 5 minutes of fame, and then they slink back into the shadows, never to be seen or heard from again. What are these people? Well, these people are going to have a rough life, I'll tell you that much for free. Because they're getting used to a very specific taste, a very specific lifestyle, a very specific set of ideologies, which will lead them to believe that the truths of their world are different from what they are, because their view of the world will be different. And then they have to adjust. And the adjustment period can take quite some time. It can take hours, weeks, days, months, years, or it can take moments. Sometimes you can go on for months and months and years and never change anything because you're set in your ways. And then some very small thing, a tiny spark, some dumb idea, some neuron misfiring, or perhaps firing a very specific way for a very specific reason, causes you to finally understand where things have been going and going wrong for the past eons, for the past understanding of the world, for the past existence that you've had. And then you realize that everything that happened leads you to who you are, up to and including that last moment which decided to show you to change. So then you start questioning everything, and then you find that the answers aren't what you're looking for. And then you find that you need to ask the question of the question. And then you find that the questions don't come because we've already done everything. The world is in a state of already been exploredness. So then we look even further out. We look towards the stars. And we try and find answers among the stars. Because that's the same thing that we've been doing for thousands of years. We try and find the answers in the stars for the questions that are right close to us. Because it's a lot harder to just look and see the thing that is right next to you sometimes and actually see it for what it is, than it is to look away and try and find answers elsewhere where they don't necessarily belong. I have a habit of overthinking everything, if you couldn't tell. And I want to seek answers where they don't belong, if you couldn't tell. But what does that mean? That means that I have a false sense of what the world is, and potentially what it should be. But I think everyone does, at least for some point in their life. And life is figuring out how to deal with a false view of the world just as much as it is everything else that exists.